Hello, I'm Indiana Calloway here with Ben Gillum. This is our podcast on the theme for English B by Langston Hughes for English 2030, Section 2. Um, to start off, I just wanted to lay out some the different sections that I'll be covering most throughout the podcast here with Ben. The first being lines 16 through 27, the second being lines 31 through 36, and the third being lines 37 through 41. Um, to start off, I'll just read the first section that I laid out, which is 16 through 27. And that is, it's not easy to know what is true for you or me at 22, my age, but I guess I'm what I feel and see and hear. Harlem, I hear you. Hear me. We two, you, me, talk on this page. I hear New York too. Me? Who? Well, I like to eat, sleep, drink, and be in love. I like to work, read, learn, and understand life. I like a pipe for Christmas. I like a pipe for a Christmas present, or records, Bessie, Bop, or Bach. I guess being colored doesn't make me not like. So will my page be colored? Not like the same things other folks like who are other races. So will my page be colored that I write? And the main idea of this section and the reason I picked it out is because it's kind of covering the idea that he's not really all that much different than anybody else. Um, you know, I kind of chose some of the lines like a pipe for a Christmas present or records, Bessie, Bop, and how important it can be to understand that you or me, despite uh, what we kind of see on the outside, is not all that different necessarily in what we want to achieve or do. Also, what are your thoughts on that, Ben?
I think it's a really good way for him to start out. I mean, I guess it's about halfway through the poem, but it still feels kind of early in it. It kind of establishes a lot of common ground, and I think it's very important. And I think it really gets his point across when he shows we really aren't any different from each other, yet you're going to see what I make as different from you.
Oh, yeah. Um, and that's just that one's kind of one of the more simple sections that I chose. It is like we said, just simply laying out I'm really not that different from you. Uh, Now going into the next section, lines 31 through 36, I'll read those here real quick. Uh, you are white, yet a part of me, as I am a part of you. That's American. Sometimes perhaps you don't want to be a part of me, nor do I often want to be a part of you, but we are. That's true. And I found this part uh, still slightly more important than the next part that I'm going to cover, but I think it's the most important part in the piece here, where he kind of lays out, people aren't always going to want to work together and just get along because of these differences that he's already laid out and kind of covered as well with, I guess, you know, disproving how they're not really that different. Um, uh,
He kind of admits that there is, just the difference in their experience, yet they're still tied together, whether they want to be or not.
yeah, there's a very much still a commonality between like him and anybody else there, especially there at Harlem where he's going to school and writing this paper for his class. Um, and I think it has a lot of parallels to today itself,
I agree.
where you see a lot of people who they for some reason or another can't, or I guess they haven't been educated. That's kind of the whole purpose of this is to kind of show people that there are parallels that have already been present in the past and now with people who kind of just don't even try to see eye to eye, um, where they just write off somebody's opinion before they've even started just because it's different, or they write them off not even because of an opinion, but just because of the way they look or act or speak, for example.
I think when he says, nor do I often want to be a part of you, I think that's really important because a lot of times when you see, arguments and disagreements, especially now. It's usually one side who, tries to take the high road and says, nothing we've done is wrong, and everything the other group has done is wrong, or everything about that other group just isn't right, uh, and that they've done everything. But he kind of admits that while they definitely weren't, the main perpetrators of any problems at the time, they at the same time, even though he didn't like them, he didn't like him back. So he kind of understood and admitted to, he wasn't really helping with the situation of them, you know, getting along sometimes. And admitting that and talking about how you're willing to work together, I think, is a major step.
Yeah, that's very true. And a lot of people now, like I think you kind of talked about that a little bit, where they go in with this like higher moral ground, at least believed higher moral ground, where they come in and say, I know I am absolutely 100% morally, correct. And if you enter any kind of discussion or debate like that, you're not going to be having a debate. It's not going to be a discussion. It's not going to be anything other than just you talking down to whatever person you're trying to convince something of.
And trying to convince somebody who's got their ideas, the only thing it does is drive them in deeper and make them more likely to act the same way you did.
Exactly. And now, like that also plays into driving that person, like you said, into acting more deeply. I think that kind of is it's true with like the very extreme ideas and beliefs you can kind of see in today's society, where you have very like far on both ends of the political spectrum, people just sitting there basically having a screaming match at all times with each other, saying that each side is at fault. But yeah, um, I
I
think.
think
Go ahead.
I think a big part of, like, at least I think, a big part of why people, seem to dig in, even when more and more things show that they're wrong, especially when it comes to something like moral, like fundamental things like that. Um, if they admitted to being wrong or admitted to doing the wrong thing, then they would have to accept all of that guilt and, take on all the weight of what they've been doing is wrong, and they, as a person, how that reflects on their character and who they are. I think that's why it's so hard for a lot of people, because they get to that point where they have the choice between either become slightly worse than they already are, and not feel bad about it, or become better and feel way worse than they were beforehand and kind of start back at square one morally.
Yeah, they'd be kind of set back temporarily, where they'd feel bad temporarily, but they'd, of course, feel better if they can find more common ground.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's like when he shared the blame earlier. I think that's a big part of it, where if somebody can just understand and maybe get that point across that you don't have to feel terrible about something if you can just change the way you're living or how you think about things, instead of, if they admit they're wrong, they're like, ha, I knew you were wrong, you're an idiot. Like, it just doesn't help them. And being able to work with them on that makes them so much more likely to not feel terrible and unlikely to, turn around.
exactly. And now let's move into the final few lines, lines 37 through 41. As I learned from you, I guess you learned from me. Although you're older and white and somewhat more free, this is my page for English B. Um, and this one's kind of a little bit more of an iteration, or not iteration, but addition on to the previous few lines, kind of just stating, uh, we all kind of learn from each other, work with each other. It's something that we have to do. You have to work with other people in this world. It's not something you can avoid unless you're, some kind of hermit off somewhere. Um, and with that, he does end out and show that inequality, which was very much present in the time that this was written, because Langston Hughes lived from 1902 to 1967, so right up until the civil rights era. Uh, so it was very much still a problem in that time period. and very true.
And when you think about the line, as I guess you learned from me, that was a major part of culture showed up in that time period. I mean, you had the Harlem Renaissance, jazz, all sorts of things throughout these time periods where Black people were oppressed, and they white people, whether they knew about it or not, learned so much from them. I mean, you have the white South, which is very religious, and a lot of Southern hymns ended up or began as slave songs or Black spirituals, and people maybe didn't think about it at the time, but they were picking up massive parts of their culture from each other.
And exactly. And that's again true and paralleled in today's times where you learn so much from people who are different from you rather than staying around those who are the same and have the same ideas. Um, and it's just such a key aspect of our globalized culture today that the only real way we can like progress and I guess develop together is by hearing and listening to each other in a very understanding way.
I mean, it would make no sense if you just had a homogenous population and 30% of it you just decided no, their ideas just they don't work because they don't work. It's so, even if you just go from the most bare bones nuts and bolts view, not using those ideas is just shooting yourself in the foot for no reason.
Exactly. And now just to kind of wrap up, we covered lines 16 through 27, which were just an outline of how he's not really that different than any other person, Hughes himself, that is. And then in lines 31 through 36, which were the next section we covered, that was, in my opinion, one of the more key parts of this poem, stating how we're all a part of each other, working together, and it's just a part of life. And finally, lines 37 through 41, which was the part or section where it's just kind of similar to the previous section, but just kind of stating that we have to learn from each other, we have to interact with each other, and grow together in order to progress. And this has been our podcast for English 2030, Section 2. Thank you for your time. Hope everyone has a wonderful day.